You may have come across games where you play as a cute animal either on a journey through a dystopian cyberpunk city or straight up being a menace for the entirety of the game. From a gamer's perspective, these games are cute, fun, and more importantly, are a fresh experience to play. But as a game developer, I've always wondered what is it about these games that make them so popular and appealing? On the surface, the answer seems pretty easy: cute, fun, and fresh, just as I mentioned. But there's much more to these games than just those three words. In this video, I'll be taking a closer look into the success of Animal Games. Before I begin, I want to mention that I am primarily talking about games where the main playable character is an animal. Although there can be gameplay overlap between games where you're riding an animal instead of being it, we are just focusing on the animal games. So there are two major reasons that are common between 90% of these games. The first one is the inheritability of this genre to provide unique core mechanics and gameplay experiences. Let me explain. So, these three open world RPGs are set in completely different worlds and are very distinct from one another in terms of gameplay. But stripping out everything and looking at just the main characters, they are humanoids, and fundamentally that means you walk, run, and jump the same. Yes, they have their own individual character attributes, in this case like magic or cybernetics that evolve or add on to the core mechanic, but you get the point. Now, at the fundamental level is where animal games have an advantage. Let's compare three open world RPGs again, this time games where you're playing as an animal. Using the same comparison method that we used before and removing out everything except the main characters, we can see that the biological anatomy and thus the locomotion systems of the characters are non identical to one another. This makes traversing and exploring the world almost an exclusive experience depending on the animal. Let's further take these two games. They are set in a similar non developed slash nature dominant world, and yet the adventure that each of these games provides is quite different to one another. In Ancestors, you're on the ground swinging and climbing through dense forests and cliffs. In Path of Titans, you're flying over the same forests, mountains, and water bodies. These kind of foundational core mechanic differences can create highly unique gameplay experiences for the player. Now, I'm not going to neglect the fact that there is obviously a good chunk of animals where the differences is nowhere as huge as my comparisons. For example, four-legged animals, say a lion, a cheetah, and an elephant. They all share the same locomotion systems, so not much difference in the way they move around. And this brings us back to the humanoid comparisons, where fundamentally the core mechanics can be the same, but the individual characteristics make all the difference in terms of the gameplay experience. Lastly, let's not forget that any species other than humans will give you access to distinctive core mechanics and attributes. Now, the way I mentioned earlier that there are two reasons, it's fair to assume that these reasons are two equal halves of the success formula. But that's not true. What I've noticed in immensely popular animal games is that there is a much bigger contributing factor at play, which is their nature to be funny and charming. Funny is a broad expression, but we can include terms like humorous, chaotic, unserious, silly, goofy, etc. under it. The thing is that people love to play games of this genre, and even more when the main character is an animal. In 2014, this was strongly proved with the release of games like Goat Simulator and Octodad. In 2020, Untitled Goose Game followed the same philosophy of the 2014 hit games and was a massive success as well. Deer Simulator is another game of this chaotic and destruction causing core gameplay. There are many other games like Gorilla Tag, Penguin Heist, Squirrel with a Gun. All these games have a mix of the five terms that I highlighted before. I obviously can't mention all the games that exist, but I hope I've given enough examples so you know what I'm talking about. Also, we as humans find animals in general charming, whether that's cute, adorable, or pretty. And there are times when games aren't necessarily following the funny gameplay path. These games double down on being charming, and that alone works as well. Games like Stray, Okami, Spirit of the North are great examples of this. And with that, we are at the end of this video. But don't get me wrong, to make a successful game, you still need to put in a lot of effort and hard work. The game needs to be fun among many other things. And more importantly, you need to win the biggest boss fight of indie game dev, which is marketing. and exactly the topic for my next video, in which I will talk about an indie game dev who is making an animal game and marketing it super well using short form videos. So make sure you subscribe to not miss the next video. I also want to say that these two reasons are my subjective observations, and I would love to hear about other factors that you believe contribute to the popularity and success of these games. I've also only mentioned very famous titles, and there are probably a lot of other lesser known or even unsuccessful games in this genre that you can comment and let everyone know about. Lastly, I want you to remember that making an animal game isn't going to guarantee you success, but may increase your chances of having a more than averagely selling game. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.